The rain came down in steady sheets that Tuesday evening, turning the streets into slick mirrors that reflected the neon glow of storefronts and streetlights. Cars hissed past, tires cutting through puddles, their headlights smearing across the wet pavement like streaks of gold. Nestled between a laundromat and a shuttered bookstore, the diner stood unassuming, a red awning frayed at the edges, a flickering open sign in the window, and steam fogging the glass from the warmth inside. It wasn't the kind of place people visited for the food alone. It was the kind of place people came when they needed to feel like someone remembered their name, or at least their usual order. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, frying onions, and the faint tang of bleach from the floor mopping earlier that afternoon. The vinyl booths were cracked in places, patched with silver duct tape that had yellowed over time. A jukebox in the corner played an old country song, low enough not to drown out conversation but loud enough to fill the silences. Two truckers sat at the counter laughing over pie. An elderly couple shared a booth near the window, their hands occasionally brushing as they spoke in soft tones. Everything moved at the pace of a slow breath, comfortable, familiar, worn smooth by routine. And then there was the man in the corner booth. He hadn't drawn attention when he walked in. Just another guy escaping the rain, shoulders hunched slightly under a damp jacket, cap pulled low over his forehead. He slid into the seat without fanfare, back to the wall, eyes scanning the room with the quiet alertness of someone used to watching more than being watched. His hands, broad with faint calluses, rested on the table, fingers tapping once, twice, then stilling. He ordered black coffee and the meatloaf special, his voice low and calm, the kind of voice that didn't ask for anything extra and didn't expect it either. The waitress who took his order barely glanced at him. She was young, maybe early 20s, with tired eyes and a name tag that read Maya. Her ponytail was coming loose, strands sticking to her temples from the kitchen heat. She moved quickly, efficiently, balancing 3 plates on one arm like it was second nature. She didn't smile much, but she wasn't rude, just focused, like every second counted. Which for her it probably did. The man watched her as she disappeared through the swinging kitchen door. He'd been coming to places like this for years, back when he first started the business, before it became a chain, before boardrooms and quarterly reports and investor calls took over his days. Back then he knew every cook by name, every dishwasher's story, every waitress's kid's birthday. But somewhere along the way the scale tipped. Growth happened fast. Decisions got made in spreadsheets, not over coffee at 2 a.m., with a line cook who needed help fixing his car. He told himself it was necessary, that you couldn't run a business with your heart. But lately that excuse had started to feel thin. He stirred his coffee slowly, watching the swirls disappear. The meatloaf arrived, thick slice, mashed potatoes, green beans swimming in butter. It looked exactly like it had 10 years ago. He took a bite. The flavors were familiar, comforting even, but something was off. Not the food itself, it was fine, maybe even good, but the feeling around it. There was a tension in the air he hadn't noticed at first, a tightness in the way the staff moved, a forced cheer in the greetings, like everyone was holding their breath. Then he heard it, a sound so quiet he almost missed it over the clatter of dishes and the hum of the refrigerator. A sob, muffled, choked back but unmistakable. It came from behind the kitchen door, just a single broken gasp followed by silence. But that one sound cut through the noise of the diner like a knife. He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. He didn't turn his head. Didn't stare, but his whole body went still. He'd heard plenty of crying in his life. Boardroom meltdowns after bad earnings, executives breaking down under pressure. But this was different. This wasn't about numbers or promotions. This was raw, human, the kind of sound someone makes when they think no one can hear them. He set his fork down gently, looked toward the kitchen door. It swung open just then, and Maya stepped out, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her expression was neutral, professional. She caught his gaze for a split second and looked away quickly, heading to another table. But he saw it, the slight tremor in her hands, the way she kept her shoulders pulled tight, like she was bracing against something. He ate the rest of his meal slowly, not because he was hungry, but because leaving now would feel like running, and he wasn't ready to run. Not yet. Outside, the rain hadn't let up. If anything, it had gotten heavier, drumming against the roof like a steady heartbeat. The truckers paid their bill and left, laughing about a missed turn somewhere near the state line. The elderly couple lingered, sharing a slice of apple pie, their conversation soft and unhurried. The diner settled into that late evening lull, when the rush is over and the night crew starts thinking about closing procedures. But the man stayed. He ordered a second coffee, more as an excuse to remain than because he wanted it. He watched Maya move between tables, refill ketchup bottles, wipe down counters. She never slowed down, not even for a second. But every time she passed the kitchen door, her steps faltered just slightly, like she was steeling herself before going back in. He wondered what had happened in there. A fight with a coworker? Bad news from home? Something worse? He didn't like guessing. Guessing led to assumptions, and assumptions were how good intentions went wrong. But he couldn't shake the image of her standing in that hot, cramped kitchen, trying to hold herself together while the world outside kept spinning like nothing was wrong. He thought about his own office, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the view of the city skyline, the assistant who scheduled his life down to the minute. He thought about the last time he'd cried, years ago, alone, in a hotel room after a deal fell through. He remembered how it felt to be that alone, even when surrounded by people who worked for you. The truth was, he hadn't come to this diner to spy. Not really. He told himself he was doing unannounced visits as part of a new initiative, getting back in touch with the front lines. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. He'd been feeling hollow lately, like he'd built something big, but lost the thing that made it matter. And maybe, just maybe, if he sat in enough of these booths, listened long enough, he'd remember what that thing was. Maya came by to clear his plate. "Everything okay?" she asked, her voice polite but distant. "Yeah," he said. "Food was good, thanks." She nodded, stacking his plate with others already moving on. But as she turned, her sleeve rode up just enough for him to see it. A faint bruise on her wrist, yellowing at the edges but still visible. He didn't stare, didn't say anything, but his stomach dropped. He paid his bill in cash, leaving a generous tip. As he stood to leave, he paused near the kitchen door. The smell of grease and dish soap drifted out. And then faintly he heard her voice again, not crying this time but talking fast, low and urgent to someone inside. "I'll figure it out. I just need a couple more days. Please just don't tell anyone." He stepped back quickly, heart pounding, not out of fear but out of respect. Whatever she was dealing with, it wasn't his to interrupt. Not like this. He walked out into the rain, pulling his collar up against the chill. The street was nearly empty now, just the occasional car splashing through puddles. He stood under the awning for a moment, water dripping from the brim of his cap. He could get in his car, drive back to his quiet house, forget he'd ever been here, pretend he hadn't heard anything, but he knew he wouldn't, because that sound, the sob in the kitchen, hadn't just been hers. It had been a reminder, a crack in the polished surface of everything he thought he'd built. And cracks, he'd learned long ago, were where the light got in. He turned back toward the diner, watching through the rain-streaked window as Maya wiped down the counter, her movements tired but determined. He didn't know her story, didn't know what she was fighting, but for the first time in years he felt something he'd almost forgotten, the weight of responsibility, not as a title, but as a promise. He walked to his car slowly, mind already turning over what came next. Not as a CEO, not as a boss, but as someone who'd just been handed a quiet plea in the middle of a rainy night and knew he couldn't ignore it. The diner's light stayed on behind him, a small beacon in the downpour. And inside, unseen but deeply felt, a young woman kept working, because she had no other choice, but maybe, just maybe, that was about to change. The next morning came gray and damp, the kind of day that feels like the world is still wringing out the rain from the night before. Puddles lingered in the potholes and the air smelled of wet concrete and distant coffee. The man, still dressed in the same worn jeans and jacket, though now clean and dry, stood across the street from the diner, hands in his pockets, watching. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, he heard that sob again, saw the bruise on the waitress's wrist, felt the weight of her whispered plea through the kitchen door. He told himself he was being foolish. He had meetings, reports, a dozen decisions waiting on his desk. But something about the quiet desperation in that kitchen had hooked into him like a fishhook in the ribs. Sharp, persistent, impossible to ignore. So he waited. By 6:30 a.m., the diner's lights flickered on. A cook arrived first, unlocking the back door with a yawn, steam already curling from the vents on the roof. Then the dishwasher, then the morning shift waitress, older with silver streaks in her hair and a walk that said she'd been doing this longer than most people had been alive. And finally her, the young one. She came on foot, a thin jacket pulled tight around her, a backpack slung over one shoulder. She moved fast, head down, like she was racing against time itself. He crossed the street just as she reached the door. "Morning," he said, keeping his voice light, casual. She startled slightly, then recognized him from the night before. Her eyes flickered with something, caution, maybe, or just exhaustion. "Oh, hey, you work the morning shift too?" he asked, as if it were small talk. "Yeah, double, night and morning." She didn't offer more, but didn't shut him out either. She unlocked the door and held it open. A silent invitation he took. Inside, the diner was quiet, still warming up. The coffee pot gurgled to life. The grill hissed as the cook started prepping bacon. She tied on her apron, checked the schedule taped to the wall, then filled the sugar shakers without looking at him. He sat in the same corner booth as before. "I'll take coffee." "Black," he said. She brought it over, set it down without a word, but this time, when she turned to leave, he spoke again, softly, so only she could hear. "You okay?" She froze, just for a second. Then she gave a short laugh that didn't reach her eyes. "Why wouldn't I be?" "No reason," he said. "Just, you seemed stressed last night." She glanced toward the kitchen, then back at him, her guard rising. "I'm fine, really, just tired." He nodded, didn't push. Fair enough. She went back to work, but now he watched more closely. Not with suspicion, but with care. He noticed how she winced slightly when she bent to pick up a dropped spoon. How she checked her phone every few minutes, screen lighting up with messages she read quickly and deleted. How she limped just a little when she thought no one was looking. At 7:15, a man in a delivery uniform dropped off a box of produce. As he chatted with the cook, the man in the booth overheard a snippet. "Heard your girl's having a rough go of it. That landlord still giving her trouble?" The cook lowered his voice, but not enough. "Yeah, raised her rent again. Said if she doesn't pay the back amount by Friday, he's changing the locks. And with her kid's medicine. Man, it's brutal." The delivery guy shook his head. "She's working, what, 3 jobs now? 2 here plus weekend cleaning gigs. Barely sleeps." The man in the booth kept his face neutral, but his chest tightened. He stirred his coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against the mug like a metronome counting down seconds he couldn't get back. By 8 a.m., the diner filled with regulars. Construction workers grabbing breakfast before the sun fully rose, a teacher grading papers in the corner, a couple of retirees splitting a stack of pancakes. The young waitress moved like a ghost among them, refilling drinks, taking orders, smiling on cue. But her eyes stayed distant, like part of her was somewhere else, somewhere heavy. He stayed through 2 more cups of coffee, watching, listening. When a customer snapped at her for forgetting extra syrup, she apologized without hesitation, voice steady, though her knuckles whitened around the tray. When the cook called her over to help with a rush order, she moved fast, efficient, but her breath came a little too quick, like she was running on fumes, and then, during a rare lull around 9:30, she disappeared into the back again. He waited a full minute before getting up and walking slowly toward the kitchen door. He didn't go in, just stood near enough to hear. Inside, someone was talking. Another waitress, older, voice low and urgent. "You can't keep doing this to yourself. You're gonna collapse. I don't have a choice," came the reply, quiet but firm. "If I miss a shift, they'll give my hours to someone else. And if I lose this job, I can't lose this job. What about the emergency fund? Didn't the company used to help with stuff like this? They cut it last year. Said it was underperforming." There was a bitter edge to her voice. "Like people's emergencies are just numbers on a spreadsheet." The older woman sighed. "I wish I could lend you something, honey, but I know. It's okay. I'll figure it out." He stepped back before they could come out, sat down again, heart pounding. Emergency fund. Cut last year. He remembered that meeting. He'd approved the cost-saving measure himself. Streamlining support programs, they'd called it. Focusing resources on growth. At the time, it had seemed logical. Necessary, even. But hearing it now, through the voice of someone who actually needed it, it sounded cold. Cruel, even. He finished his coffee and left a 20 under the mug. More than enough for the refills, but not so much it would draw attention. As he walked out, he saw her through the kitchen window, leaning against the stainless steel counter, eyes closed, one hand pressed to her temple. She looked so young, so tired, and so alone. That afternoon, he didn't go to his office. Instead, he drove to a quiet park a few blocks away, parked under a dripping oak tree, and made a call. "Pull up everything on the diner on Elm and 5th, he said when his assistant answered. "Staffing records, recent schedule changes, any HR complaints, payroll adjustments. And find out who the property manager is for the building next door, the apartments above the hardware store." There was a pause. "Is this about the undercover visit?" "Just get me the info and keep it quiet." He hung up and sat there for a long time, watching pigeons peck at crumbs near a bench. He thought about the bruise on her wrist. Not from violence, he was almost certain of that now. More likely from carrying heavy laundry bags or gripping a stroller too tight on a bad day. The kind of mark that comes from life pressing down too hard for too long. By evening, the file was waiting in his encrypted inbox. He read it slowly, under the dim light of his car. Her name was Maya, hired 2 years ago. Near perfect attendance, never late. Requested schedule changes 3 times in the past 6 months. All denied due to staffing constraints. Filed 1 HR inquiry about unsafe stair lighting in the employee. Entrance marked resolved but never fixed. Rent for her apartment, $950 month. Recent rent increase, $150. Back rent owed, $420. Son, age 4. Medical records redacted, but insurance claims showed recurring prescriptions. Asthma, possibly allergies. And then the kicker. The emergency aid program had been eliminated company-wide 8 months ago, replaced with a self-service financial wellness portal that required login credentials, credit checks, and a 72-hour approval window. No one had used it. Not once. He closed the file and leaned his head back against the seat. This wasn't just bad luck. This was a system failing someone who was doing everything right, showing up, working hard, asking for help, and getting nothing in return. That night he returned to the diner. Same booth. Same order. But this time he wasn't just observing. He was listening for the story behind the silence. Maya served him again, her movements even slower than before. Dark circles under her eyes. She didn't try to hide her exhaustion this time. Maybe she didn't have the energy. When she brought his check, he caught her wrist, not tightly, just enough to stop her for a second. She tensed but didn't pull away. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said quietly. "But if you ever need someone to talk to, I'm a good listener." She studied his face, searching for angles, for traps. Finding none, she gave a small nod. "Thanks," she whispered. "But I've got it," he let go. "I believe you. But it's okay not to." She looked like she wanted to say more, but the bell over the door jingled. New customers. She straightened her apron and walked away. He stayed until closing, watched her mop the floor, restock napkin dispensers, count the register with the night manager, watched how she rubbed her lower back when she thought no one was looking, watched how she checked her phone one last time before turning off the lights, then tucked it into her pocket with a sigh that carried the weight of 1,000 sleepless nights as she locked the front door and stepped onto the sidewalk. He approached again, this time under the street lamp's amber glow. "Can I walk you to your car?" he asked. She hesitated. "I don't have a car. I take the bus. Then can I walk you to the stop?" She looked at him, really looked, and saw no threat. Just concern. After a long moment, she nodded. They walked in silence for 2 blocks. Rain had stopped, but the air was cool. At the bus shelter, he stopped. "I used to run a small place like that," he said, nodding toward the diner. "Years ago. Before it got big. Back then, if someone was struggling, we helped. Not because it was policy. Because it was the right thing." She hugged her arms around herself. "Things change." "They shouldn't have to," he said. "Not when people are still the same." The bus rumbled into view, brakes hissing. She stepped forward, then turned back. "Why do you care?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He met her eyes. "Because someone should." She got on the bus without another word. He watched it pull away, red taillights fading into the night. And for the first time in a long time, he knew exactly what he had to do, not as a CEO, but as a human being who'd just been reminded that success means nothing if it leaves good people behind. The next morning, he didn't come in disguise. He still wore jeans, but they were clean and pressed. His jacket was gone, replaced by a simple button-down shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. No cap, no hunched shoulders. Just a man walking into the diner like he belonged there, which in a way he did, though no one knew it yet. It was just after 6 a.m. The same silver-haired waitress was wiping down the counter. The cook was flipping pancakes with the ease of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. And Maya, she was already there, tying on her apron, dark circles still under her eyes but her posture straight, like she'd steeled herself for another long day. When she saw him, she paused. Not with fear, but with quiet surprise. "You're back." "I am," he said. "Mind if I sit?" She nodded toward his usual booth. "It's all yours." He ordered coffee and toast, nothing fancy. While he waited, he watched her move. There was a new kind of tension in the air now, not just from her, but from everyone. Word had spread quietly that the quiet man from the corner booth had walked Maya to the bus stop. In a place where gossip traveled faster than the coffee refills, that was enough to make people curious. But he wasn't here for gossip. He sipped his coffee slowly, letting the minutes pass. When the morning rush began to taper off, around 8:30, he caught her eye and gave a small nod toward the back. She hesitated, then glanced at the manager who was counting receipts at the register. He waved her over. "Take your break," the manager said, not looking up. "You've earned it." She untied her apron and followed the man through the kitchen, past the clatter of dishes and the hiss of the dishwasher, into the narrow break room tucked behind the storage closet. It smelled faintly of microwave popcorn and old coffee grounds. A single window looked out onto a brick wall. 2 folding chairs sat beside a dented fridge. He didn't sit. Neither did she. "I'm not who you think I am," he said gently. She crossed her arms. "I don't think you're anyone. You're just a guy who keeps showing up." He smiled faintly. "Fair. But what if I told you I started this company? That this diner, everyone like it, was built from an idea I had in a garage 15 years ago?" She blinked, then laughed, a short, skeptical sound. "Right, and I'm the Queen of England." "I'm serious," he said, not offended. "I haven't been around much lately. Too much growth, too many layers between me and the people who actually make this work. But last week I decided to come back. To see what I'd missed." She studied him, his hands no rings but clean, capable. His eyes tired but steady. No arrogance. No performative charm. Just honesty. "Why tell me this?" she asked. "Because last night when you asked why I care, I realized I hadn't been caring enough. Not in the way that matters." She looked away toward the window. "Look, I appreciate the walk and the coffee and whatever this is. But I don't need pity. I just need to get through the week." "It's not pity," he said. "It's responsibility." Silence stretched between them, thick but not hostile. Outside, a delivery truck rumbled past. Inside, the hum of the fridge filled the quiet. Finally, she sighed and sank into one of the chairs. He sat across from her. "I don't know why I'm telling you this," she began, voice low. "But my son's got asthma, bad. He was in the hospital twice last winter. Insurance covers most of it, but not all. And then my landlord, the guy who owns the building above the hardware store, he raised the rent. Said it was market adjustment, but I've lived there 3 years. Never late on rent. Never a complaint." She rubbed her temples. "I asked for a schedule change last month. Just 2 afternoons off so I could take my son to a specialist. They said no. Not enough coverage. So I picked up extra shifts here, plus I clean offices on weekends. But it's not enough. I'm 2 weeks behind on rent now. Landlord says if I don't pay by Friday, he's changing the locks." Her voice cracked just slightly. She swallowed hard. "I cried in the kitchen the other night because I got a call from daycare. They said if I don't pay the late fee, they'll stop watching him. And if I don't have daycare, I can't work." "And if I can't work?" She trailed off, shaking her head. "It's just, I feel like I'm running in place." Faster and faster, but sinking deeper. He listened. Not like a boss, not like someone waiting to fix it with a check, but like someone who understood that some wounds don't heal with money alone. They heal with dignity, with being seen. "I remember when we had the emergency fund," she added quietly. "My cousin used it once when her car broke down. Got a no-interest loan. Paid it back in 6 months. It saved her job, but now, there's nothing. Just that online thing. I tried logging in, asked for help, got an automated email saying my request was under review. That was 3 weeks ago." He nodded. I approved the shutdown of that program. She looked up, surprised. I thought I was being smart, he said. Cutting costs, streamlining. But I forgot that people aren't line items. They're lives. And when you treat them like numbers, you break things that can't be fixed with a spreadsheet. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, so what now? You gonna fire the manager for saying no to my schedule? No, he said. The manager was following policy. The problem isn't him. It's the policy. He leaned forward. I can't undo the last 8 months. But I can change what happens next. Starting today, she frowned. How? First, your rent. Consider it covered. Not a loan. Not charity. A correction. She opened her mouth to protest, but he held up a hand. Second, your schedule. You'll get those afternoons off. And you'll keep your full hours. No penalties. Wait, how can you just do that? Because I own the company, he said simply. And I'm choosing to use that power differently. She stared at him, eyes wide. Not with disbelief now, but with something closer to awe and fear. Why me? There are dozens of people struggling. Why help me? Because you were the one I heard, he said. And sometimes one voice is enough to remind you what you've forgotten. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. I don't want special treatment. You're not getting it, he said. You're getting what should have been there all along. And you're going to help me make sure it's there for everyone else, too. She looked confused. How? I'm bringing back the emergency fund. Better than before. No credit checks. No waiting. Just real help fast. And I'm rewriting the scheduling policy. Caregivers get priority, always. He paused. But I need your help. I need to know what actually works. Not what looks good on paper. What helps people like you stay afloat without drowning. She was quiet for a long time. Then she gave a small, shaky nod. Okay. Okay, he echoed. They sat in silence for a few more minutes, the weight of the conversation settling between them like dust after a storm. Before he left, he handed her a plain white envelope. Don't open it here, he said. And don't tell anyone, not yet, just take care of your son. She took it, fingers trembling slightly. Thank you. No, he said. Thank you for reminding me what this was all supposed to be about. He walked out of the break room, past the kitchen, past the counter where the cook gave him a curious glance. He didn't look back. But as he stepped onto the sidewalk, he felt lighter than he had in years. That afternoon, he called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. Not in the boardroom. In a rented community center near the diner. He didn't bring slides, didn't talk about margins or growth targets. He told them a story about a young woman working double shifts, trying to keep a roof over her child's head, crying in a kitchen because the system she depended on had failed her. And it failed her because we let it, he said, voice quiet but firm. We got so focused on building something big, we forgot to keep it human. He laid out the changes, reinstating the emergency aid fund with immediate effect, revising scheduling protocols, launching a confidential staff support line staffed by real people, not bots. He also announced a new policy. Every executive would spend 1 week per quarter working frontline shifts, no titles, no special treatment, some pushed back. It'll cost money. Investors won't like the hit to short-term profits. What if people abuse the system? He listened, then said, then we'll deal with it, but I'd rather lose a few dollars than lose our soul. By the end of the day, the changes were approved, not because he demanded it, but because for the first time in a long time, his team remembered why they'd joined this company in the first place. That evening, he drove past the diner again. Lights were on. Through the window, he saw Maya laughing with the silver-haired waitress, her shoulders relaxed, her smile real. She caught his eye through the glass and gave a small wave. He didn't go in. Not tonight. Some things needed space to breathe. But as he drove away, he knew one thing for certain. The man who'd walked into that diner a week ago, lost, distant, wrapped in the armor of success, wasn't the same man leaving it now. He'd come looking for answers. Instead, he'd found his way back. The next morning, the diner buzzed with a different kind of energy. It wasn't just the usual clatter of plates or the hiss of the grill. There was a low hum of curiosity, of something shifting beneath the surface. Staff arrived earlier than usual, exchanging glances, whispering in corners. A sleek black sedan, unusual for this part of town, was parked out front. And inside, near the register, stood the man from the corner booth, now dressed in a crisp shirt, sleeves still rolled, but with an air about him that couldn't be ignored. He wasn't hiding anymore. By 7 a.m., every employee had been asked to gather in the dining area once their opening tasks were done. The cook wiped his hands on his apron. The dishwasher leaned against the counter. The morning waitress clutched her coffee like a lifeline. Maya stood near the back, arms crossed, eyes wide but steady. She'd opened the envelope the night before. Inside was a check, enough to cover her rent, her son's medical copays, and a little extra. No note, just her name and the amount. She hadn't slept, not from worry, but from the strange, trembling hope that maybe, just maybe, things could actually change. When the last of the staff had gathered, the man stepped forward. He didn't stand on a chair or raise his voice. He just spoke, calm and clear, like he was talking to friends over breakfast. "I know most of you don't know me," he began, "and until last week I didn't really know you. Not the way I should have. I built this company because I believed food could be more than a meal. It could be comfort, community, a place where people feel seen." He paused, looked around at their faces, tired, skeptical, waiting for the catch. But somewhere along the way I got lost in the numbers, in the growth, in the idea of what this company could be instead of honoring what it already was, a place held together by people like you. A few exchanged glances. No one spoke. "I've made mistakes," he continued. "Big ones. Like cutting the emergency fund. Like letting scheduling policies become rigid rules instead of tools to help you live your lives. Like forgetting that when you're working double shifts, you're not just an employee. You're a parent, a student, someone's lifeline." He took a breath. "That ends today." He didn't announce it like a CEO unveiling a new product. He said it like a promise. First, the emergency aid program is coming back better than before. No credit checks. No waiting weeks for approval. If you're in a crisis, a medical bill, a broken down car, a rent emergency, you can get help within 24 hours. Full confidentiality. No questions that shame you. Murmurs rippled through the group. The older waitress wiped her eyes quickly. "Second," he went on, "we're rewriting the scheduling policy. Starting now, if you have caregiving responsibilities, kids, elderly parents, anyone who depends on you, you get priority for stable, predictable hours. Need an afternoon off for a doctor's appointment? You'll get it, not as a favor. As a right." He turned slightly, his gaze landing on Maya. She didn't look away. "Third, I'm launching a support line staffed by real people, not bots, where you can talk about anything, stress, housing, childcare, even just needing someone to listen, and it won't affect your job. Ever." He let that sink in. "And finally," he said, voice softer now, "I'm asking you to hold me accountable. If I disappear again, if things go back to how they were, call me out. Email me directly. Walk into my office. I'll be here more often, not as a visitor but as someone who works alongside you." Silence. Then slowly the cook nodded. The dishwasher gave a quiet, "Hell yeah." The older waitress sniffed and said, "About damn time." But the real moment came when Maya stepped forward. She didn't say much. Just looked at him and said, "Thank you." He nodded. "No, thank you for speaking up even when it was hard." After the meeting, things didn't magically transform overnight, but the air felt lighter. The manager, who'd been bracing for reprimands, was instead pulled into a quiet conversation about how to implement the new scheduling rules fairly. The cook joked that he might finally take that vacation he'd been putting off for 5 years. And Maya? She walked taller, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Later that afternoon, the man sat down with the manager in the same booth where he'd first heard her cry. Spreadsheets were pulled up on a tablet. Lists of denied schedule requests from the past 6 months. One by one, they went through them. This one needed time off for a court date. Denied. Approved now. Backdated. Full pay. This one, childcare fell through. Asked for a shift swap, let's call them. Offer a temporary adjusted schedule. It took hours. But by the time the dinner rush began, a dozen staff members had received calls. Unexpected, kind, full of solutions instead of excuses. Maya was finishing her shift when her phone buzzed. A message from HR. Your schedule has been updated. Afternoons off on Tuesdays and Thursdays starting next week. Lead trainer role offer attached. Please confirm by Friday. She read it 3 times. then looked up and saw the man watching her from the doorway, not with pride, but with quiet respect. She walked over. "Lead trainer? You've got the heart for it," he said. "And the experience. Better pay, same hours, plus a bonus for mentoring new hires." She swallowed. "I don't know if I'm ready." "You already are," he said. "You just didn't know it yet." That night, as she locked up the diner, she didn't head straight for the bus stop. She stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing in the cool evening air. For the first time in months, she didn't feel like she was drowning. She felt like she was standing on solid ground. Back at company headquarters, the man canceled his next 3 meetings. Instead, he called a company-wide virtual town hall, mandatory for all executives, optional for everyone else. Over 5,000 employees logged in from diners, distribution centers, and home offices across the region. He didn't talk about profits, didn't show graphs, just told the truth. "I spent last week in one of our diners," he said, "not as a CEO but as a customer, and I heard someone crying in the kitchen. That sound changed everything." He shared the story, carefully, respectfully, never naming names but making it clear that this wasn't about one person. It was about a system that had stopped seeing people. "Success isn't just revenue," he said. "It's whether the people who make that success possible can sleep at night without worrying about rent, medicine, or whether their kid will have a place to stay. If we can't answer yes to that, then we're failing, no matter how big our numbers look." He announced the same changes to the entire company. And then he did something unexpected. He opened the floor for live questions. No filters. No PR team screening. For 2 hours he answered them. Honestly, sometimes awkwardly, but always directly. "Will this affect bonuses?" "Short-term, maybe. Long-term, a healthier team means a stronger company." "What if my locations manager resists?" "Then you email me directly, I'll handle it." "Is this just a PR move?" He smiled faintly. "If it were, I wouldn't be doing it from a diner at 6 a.m. with grease on my shoes." By the end, the chat was flooded with messages. "Thank you. I've worked here 12 years. This is the first time I feel proud. My daughter starts college next month. This fund might be the difference." He logged off not with a flourish but with a quiet sense of purpose. That evening he returned to the diner one last time that week. Not to inspect, not to fix, just to be. Maya was training a new hire, showing her how to balance trays, how to read a customer's mood, how to refill coffee without being asked. She moved with confidence now, her voice calm, patient. When she saw him, she waved him over. "Try the pie," she said, sliding a slice onto a plate. "Cook made it special." He took a bite. "Warm apples, flaky crust, just the right amount of cinnamon." "Perfect," he said. She smiled. "Yeah, it is." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the evening crowd drift in. Students, night shift workers, couples sharing a quiet meal. "You know," she said finally, "I used to think people like you didn't care, that we were just cogs. And now?" he asked. "Now I think maybe you just forgot how to listen. And that's fixable," he nodded. "Some things are." Before he left, he slipped a small notebook under his plate. Inside, on the first page, he'd written, "Ideas for making this place better. Your voice matters." He left it for her, but really for everyone, as he walked out into the night. The diner behind him glowed like a lighthouse, small, steady, full of life. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like the owner. He felt like part of something real. A month had passed since the rain-soaked night when everything began to shift. The air had turned crisper, carrying the first hints of autumn. Dry leaves skittering down sidewalks, the smell of wood smoke mixing with exhaust and coffee. The diner still stood between the laundromat and the shuttered bookstore, but something inside it had changed. Not in the layout or the menu, but in the rhythm, the breath of the place. People lingered longer. Laughter came easier. Even the jukebox seemed to play songs with a little more warmth. He walked in just after lunchtime. No cap this time. No attempt to blend in. He didn't need to. The staff knew him now, not as a distant figurehead, but as the man who'd sat in the corner, listened, and then acted. The cook gave a nod. The dishwasher waved. And Maya, she saw him the moment he stepped through the door and smiled, not with formality, but with something close to friendship. She brought him coffee before he even sat down. "Black, right?" "Still got it," he said. She slid into the booth across from him, apron tied neatly, hair pulled back but not fraying like before. There was a calm in her eyes that hadn't been there a few weeks ago. Not because life was perfect. She'd told him her son still had bad nights, that the landlord had been surprised but grateful for the back rent, but because she wasn't fighting alone anymore. "How's the training going?" he asked. "Good," she said. "The new girl's sharp. Picks things up fast. I showed her how to tell when someone just needs quiet and when they need someone to talk to. That's the real job, you know, not just serving food," he nodded. "That's always been the heart of it." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the afternoon light slant through the window. A college student scribbled in a notebook at the counter. An older man read the paper, sipping soup slowly like he had all the time in the world. "You ever think about going back to school?" he asked. She stirred her own coffee. She'd taken a break, something she never would have done before. "I am," she said. "Night classes. Business admin. It's slow, but I want to understand how places like this really work. Not just from the floor, but from the inside." He smiled. "You'll be running your own place someday." "Maybe," she said, not boastfully but with quiet certainty. "Or maybe I'll help make sure every place like this treats people right. Either way, I'm not just surviving anymore." That was the thing he kept noticing, not just in her, but in the whole team. They weren't just clocking in. They were showing up, present, proud, like they belonged, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Later that week, he invited her to headquarters, not for a meeting, but to sit in on the planning session for the new employee support program. She walked into the sleek conference room with her notebook and a thermos of diner coffee, and didn't flinch at the polished tables or the executives in tailored suits. She spoke plainly, honestly, about what had almost broken her, what had helped, what still felt fragile. "She's got more insight than half the consultants we've hired," one VP muttered afterward. He just smiled. "Because she's lived it." The program launched 2 weeks later. No fanfare. Just a simple email to all staff, a new number posted in every break room, and a promise. If you're struggling, you won't be ignored. Within days, calls started coming in, not just for rent or medical help, but for counseling referrals, childcare leads, even help navigating public benefits, and every request was handled by a real person, trained not in policy but in compassion. Back at the diner, Maya began mentoring not just new hires but other staff thinking about going back to school or changing careers. She started a small group that met after closing once a week, just to talk, share resources, remind each other they weren't alone. The manager, once rigid about rules, now asked, "What do you need to make this work?" instead of "That's not allowed." One evening, as the man sat in his usual booth reviewing a report on the program's early impact, Maya slid a plate in front of him. "Not on the menu. Just a slice of homemade banana bread. My son helped bake it," she said. "Said it's for the man who helped us keep our home." He looked up surprised. "He knows about me? He knows someone listened when Mom was sad," she said simply. "That's enough." He took a bite. It was slightly lopsided, a little too sweet, perfect in its imperfection. He felt his throat tighten. "Tell him thank you," he said quietly. She nodded, then hesitated. "You know, I used to think people in charge didn't see us, like we were just background noise, and now I think maybe you just needed someone to remind you that we're real." He looked around the diner, the warm light, the hum of conversation, the clink of silverware. This wasn't just a business. It was a living thing built on tired feet and kind words and second chances. A few days later, he stood in front of the entire leadership team again, not in a boardroom but in the very diner where it all began. He'd moved the quarterly strategy session here on purpose. "Let them see it. Let them feel it. This is our real balance sheet," he said, gesturing to the staff moving with purpose, to the customers who came back. Not for the food alone, but for the feeling. Not the one in the reports, this. He announced a new policy. Every new executive hire would spend their first week working the floor, washing dishes, taking orders, cleaning bathrooms. Not as a gimmick, as an initiation into what the company truly valued. One executive raised a hand. "Won't that slow things down?" "Maybe," he said. "But if we forget what this feels like, we've already lost." That night, after everyone had left, he stayed behind. Maya was wiping down the counter, humming softly. She didn't look up right away. "You're still here," she said. "Yeah," he said, "just watching." She finished the counter, then sat across from him like they were old friends sharing a quiet moment. "You changed things," she said. "No," he replied. "You did. I just finally listened." Outside, the streetlights flickered on. The city moved on, unaware of the small revolution that had begun in a rainy kitchen. But inside, something had been restored, not just for her, but for everyone who walked through that door. Before he left, he pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket and tucked it under his empty coffee cup. On it, in his own handwriting, just 2 lines. "Thank you for reminding me what this is really about. Keep speaking. I'll keep listening." Maya found it after he'd gone. She read it once, then folded it carefully and put it in her apron pocket, right next to her son's latest drawing. The one labeled "My Hero" and "The Nice Man Who Helped." The next morning, the man walked into his office not to check stock prices or approve budgets, but to draft a letter to every employee in the company. No corporate jargon, no buzzwords, just a simple message. We built this together. Let's never forget that the most important part of business is the human in it. He hit send, then turned off his computer early, something he hadn't done in years. As he drove home, windows down, cool air on his face, he passed the diner again. Lights were on. Through the window, he saw Maya laughing with a new trainee, showing her how to flip a pancake just right. The kind of moment no spreadsheet could measure, no profit margin could capture. And in that moment, he knew success wasn't a number on a screen. It was a young mother sleeping soundly because she knew her child was safe. It was a cook taking his first vacation in a decade. It was a company that chose people over polish. He didn't need a title to feel proud anymore. He just needed to remember to listen, and this time he wouldn't forget.